Hello, good evening.
Vicki, we are moments away from being live, so be chipper.
Matt,
We are live on YouTube. And now I'm going to start the webinar.
Hello. Joe. Hello.
good evening.
This is. What is that?
What?
No, I'm sorry. I was talking to someone.
Oh,
Good evening, everyone. This is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We're getting started in just a couple of minutes, just letting everybody in the door welcome. And welcome to Dove, who is now 7. You're just joining us. We are just letting everybody in the door. Welcome. You're just joining us. This is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. Just letting everybody in the door on Zoom. That's what we do. If you're just joining us, this is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We'll get started in just a minute. And there's the magic number. I was waiting for one more person to join. That's good. Get 2 more people. Well, welcome everybody. Good evening. This is Matt Losack. I'm a co-founder, executive director of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. For those who don't know us, we were founded in 2010. We are the first and only regional nonprofit dedicated exclusively to renter outreach, education, organizing, and advocacy. Tonight's Renter Town Hall will be hopefully short and sweet and focused exclusively on forming tenants associations. We have worked with scores of renters communities across Montgomery County to form tenants association with varying success for all kinds of reasons we'll discuss tonight. We'll discuss the challenges of putting together a tenants association, the benefits, the various levels of tenants associations and some of the best practices, as well as the law. We're recording tonight, so we'll, as we always do, it'll be on YouTube, so you can watch it again at another time. If you have any questions or concerns, please put them in the chat. Our staff will be monitoring that, and we'll make sure that we address them throughout the discussion. Let me just add a couple things here. Let me go over something that a lot of people don't realize. I'm going to need to pull this up because I accidentally clicked out of it. Right, is this it? Not it. Hang on. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll be with you in just a second.
So how's everybody doing? Anyone? How's the chat doing? If you can hear me, give me some sort of emoji. Anyone? Oh, there's an emoji.
Okay.
How are you, Tim?
Good. How you doing? Is this
I'm
Victoria?
good. I'm doing okay.
Oh, Pat. Okay.
Yeah, sorry I didn't. This is Vicky. Used to be at Charter House. I'm at Silver Creek now, but I'm sorry I didn't answer. I've got a new Dell that's about to send me to, well, make them open St. Elizabeth's again, but it only has 2 ports. I'm not used to that, so I have to pull the mouse out and then pull something else in, and that's what took up my time. But I'm so glad to see everybody. It's been a while,
Thank you for
at least for me.
Thank
Did
you
I
for
fill in
filling-
okay?
Yes. Thank you all for filling that terrible void. I just found it.
Okay.
Let me now add this and just put this on so people can see. Can everybody see that? All right, this is very important
Yes.
for people to know this. This is about people's rights to organize. I'm going to read this just so everybody's clear. Tenants have a right to organize. Tenants have the right to self-organization, to form, join, meet, or assist one another within or without tenant organizations, to meet and confer through representatives of their own choosing with landlords, to engage in other concerted activities for the purpose of mutual aid and protection, or to refrain from such activity. This is Montgomery County Code 2933. Section B. Tenants and tenant organizations have the right to free assembly in the meeting rooms and other areas suitable for meetings within rental housing during reasonable hours and upon reasonable notice to the landlord to conduct tenant organization meetings. A landlord must not charge a tenant organization or a group of tenants seeking to form a tenant organization a fee for the first meeting of each month held to discuss landlord-tenant issues. But the landlord may charge a reasonable fee for other uses of the meeting rooms or common areas. The charge must not exceed the regular schedule of fees for the facility or other groups. The landlord may also impose reasonable terms and conditions on the use of the meeting rooms or common areas if those terms and conditions do not undermine the purpose of this section. Tenants and tenant organizations have the right to distribute freely and post in centrally located areas of rental housing literature concerning landlord-tenant issues if the origin of the literature is properly identified. Tenant organizations may file complaints under any provision of this chapter in a representative capacity or on behalf of those tenants who have authorized representation. Nothing in this chapter permits any tenants organization to represent exclusively any tenant or class of tenants unless specifically authorized to do so. Very important. I have to say we fought hard to expand this law. There was a time when we started the Renters Alliance, again, back in 2010, where the law simply said that tenants had a right to use the community facility, but that the landlord could charge an hourly fee for the use of that facility, which became prohibitively expensive for tenants trying to organize. You know, some of these places would charge $150, $200 an hour to use the community room, and that was impossible for tenants getting organized to come up with that kind of money. So now We have expanded that law as part of Bill 1915. The leading co-sponsor was at the time was Council Member Mark Elrich, now the county executive, so that it can be done for free. Another part of the law that's very important is also to ensure that you have the right to distribute literature around the building in reasonable ways, the same way a landlord does, whether it be door to door or in the community spaces, as long as it's properly identified as to where it came from. It's very different from soliciting. Many properties will say, hey, look, we don't allow literature to be distributed. You can't distribute Chinese menus. You can't distribute religious information or political information. But actually the law distinguishes those issues from renter organizing, and renter organizing is protected. We have come into challenges against all of these rights, and so I just want to make sure people understand exactly what your rights are. So with that, I thought we would also discuss what the nature of various types of tenant organizations are. And they really come in all forms. So before I get started, let me just quickly introduce our staff. We have with us our Director of Outreach is David Mullins. Our outreach coordinators are Tim Wong, Melek Demir, and Emily Towie, and Pat Beckham. And also later to discuss her experiences as a leading renter organizer and leader of her tenants association will be Victoria Price, who will bring us on a little bit later on in the discussion. So Melek, why don't you tell us sort of the general overview of the types of tenants associations that we see out there?
Right. So when you think about forming a tenant association, it can be an overwhelming thought because the top level has officers, bylaws, regular meetings, treasurers, but that's not how we start. You can start with just an active group of residents. So one of the more effective tenant associations that recently launched is in Silver Spring, and it started with a group of 5 to 6 people meeting at a Panera. And from there, we work with them to start having monthly meetings and then involving council members. So that's your basic level, that's your foundation. After that, then you get into a more escalated version where you have officers and bylaws and regular meetings and minutes. And it's easy to ramp up to that, by the way. One of the things that Renters Alliance does is we help you work up to that level so that so that you get to there. The important thing out of all of this is organization, being organized, being collectively empowered to fight for whatever rights you're entitled to for living in your home. And I think David and Patricia later on in this meeting is going to actually go through what those levels are and give you more details on the tenants association structure.
Well, let's go into that just a little bit more. I know that we kind of have an A, B, C, D levels here. And the D is what Melek just described, which is, a group of tenants getting together and saying, hey, we want to be active in our community. And that's all right. You can form a tenants association at any level you choose. You don't have to make it something onerous that becomes, a political party or some other, or a nonprofit organization or something, but unless you want to. We have seen tenants associations that have become very formal. And in my experience, I've seen them that are actually have legal status. That's not necessary. So we want to make sure that you all who want to form tenants association not see this as a monumental task. It can be as simple as you want to make it, or as involved as you choose to get yourself active. So, the next sort of level up, if D is just a bunch of tenants who are kind of organized or collectively working together, to partially organized with officers, sort of, kind of, with knowledge of your rights and what resources are out there for you. So you become kind of the community leaders or community activists that are just there available to your neighbors in some way. You might throw a meeting from time to time, but basically you just become a core group of folks that are known to your neighbors as knowledgeable about rights and resources. That's sort of the C level. And the B level, working our way up to a more formal organization, would be one that has officers and bylaws and has a meeting from time to time. So you know that there's a president of the organization. In my building, for example, that's what we have. We have a president and a vice president and so on, but we haven't met in a long time. We just really haven't had to, and there hasn't really been a desire to, but it's there. And the organization does have some structure. Whereas the A level has officers, it has bylaws, it has regular meetings, it keeps minutes of those meetings, and does some advocacy as well for policy and legislation when the time comes. And it has a broad schedule of issues, not just to complain, though certainly that's part of it, to act collectively to address building issues and quality and complaints, but also to, as our slogan points out, to build community. So welcoming new neighbors, becoming active citizens in your community and inviting elected officials and people running for office to your community group to express their opinions and tell and be held accountable and to do the work that they are elected to do. To bring in experts who can talk about how to grow plants in your apartment, for example, or to have a wine and cheese, or some other community social activity. So all of those things keep people engaged in a tenants association just as they would in a neighborhood association. And the most successful tenants associations that have longevity, even though all tenants associations are more active and less active over a long period of time, but those that hold together the best are the ones that have a diversity of activities in their meetings and have regular meetings, even if those meetings are only once every 3 months or so. Some of them have meetings once a month, but you know that may be too much for some folks. But having regular meetings, at least, whether it be once a quarter or 3 times a year or even twice a year, would be part of a sort of a regular, organized A-level tenants association. And by the way, we have resources on all of these things, including sample bylaws and you know how to get officers together and so on.
I just want to add one
yeah,
important
please
tool
do.
that some of the communities are using is they create a listserv. So when people come to the meetings, they get a sign-up sheet, they get their email addresses, and then they know how to regularly communicate with the tenants on important updates. So that's another tool for you.
Right. But some people always say, you know, why should we go through all this trouble aside from being nice to our neighbors and so on? Well, there are actually very important reasons for that. And David, why don't you answer the question, why do we form tenants associations?
Gladly. If I can catch my voice here, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second.
No drinking on the job.
I'm having to compete with Coco Melon out here, and so it's the levels are difficult. But no, I think we've touched on some of them already, and I kind of wanted to just pile on to those because there's a sense of the collective that has already come up, I think, throughout. You know, when you start having that critical mass of folks that are coming together around, again, perhaps a specific issue or a chain of specific issues, or you know, issues that become systemic or something, or just trying to know your neighbors, whatever the reason. When that critical mass comes together, then there is when something comes up that is urgent or distressing for one of those members. I mean, you do have that group to fall back on, and then also that group to either go as a group to the county, or whether it's the property manager. It changes the dynamic. And I think that one of the main reasons is to have that power that comes in that group. But I want to make sure to kind of take a step back and point out that in my experience, I've noticed that there's this huge organic element to how that kind of critical mass comes together. And it really changes property by property in my experience about like what is happening right then to folks. But then there may be some individual issues people are experiencing, but when it rises to a level where something seems systemic, like I am having the same problem as all of my neighbors, then that energy, kind of builds on, that may bring some people together. And then we have, I think, really good tools to help, keep that energy going, and suggestions for how to organize that. But it's almost, I gotta say, it's almost like going viral. It seems like where there is this kind of element of timing that is, and I want to point that out, that it's a little beyond people's control, because I've noticed some people that have rallied around some really a specific issue. There's been some good progress on that, but maybe it didn't become something formalized, and that's led to some frustration, I think, in a couple properties. And but then in other places, it's almost like this is the first time these people have come together around something, and all of a sudden it's this core group that becomes a formalized tenants association. It really is. There's so many moving parts and factors that there are many different paths, but a commonality across them is that when you have a group of people that are going to either try to get someone's back who's having problems, again, with either getting the county or a property manager to notice something, coming in a group will change the dynamic. Again, that is a huge reason to do it there. And then I think something else that's come up too already is that it's just, you now have a group of people that can keep each other informed about your rights, about other basic information about who to call with what problem, either within the property management structure or within the county, city, municipality structure. You've got people to share that information with. And then I've found then that can evolve to vetting information. So you've got some basic information people can share, which is, a huge asset, and spread it throughout the property. But then also, if new information comes in, hey, I heard XYZ, there's going to be a meeting about this or what have you, you can kind of vet it amongst each other and say, okay, well, is that something that we want to be involved in collectively or not? And that kind of leads to the building community that I think you mentioned, which is that you've got this common purpose of having a good, safe, sustainable place to live. But yeah, there's just always going to be power in numbers. There's no way around that. That's a huge asset to the whole thing.
I think it's also worth noting that unfortunately, retaliation against tenants does exist. And we have seen property managers and landlords who will go after tenants who are pursuing promised or required services in their building, pursuing their rights, trying to negotiate for a better rent situation, and being met with abuse, neglect, or even threats of eviction. And acting collectively is a way of increasing your defense against that kind of retaliation. And so, when you have the tenants association representing the building's interests and neighbors and so on, it provides protection in numbers, frankly. And so it's against the law to retaliate, but sometimes it's difficult to defend against it if you don't have people helping you and acting collectively. All right, let's move on a little bit. If there are questions, again, please put them in the chat. We can answer at the end of this discussion on tenants associations any questions about renter issues out there in general. We'll get to that after this subject area. But Emily Towie, our outreach coordinator, why don't you go through some of the challenges that we're seeing of informing tenants associations?
Yeah, sure. Like, as you already mentioned, there is a fear that tenants have about retaliation from their property management. And that does discourage some tenants from wanting to form or to put their name down as the president of an organization, because they fear that they'll be evicted or harassed in some kind of way. And if that does happen to you, just reach out to the Renters Alliance, and we can help with that, with speaking to your landlord and point out the law that Matt showed at the beginning, that tenants do have a right to organize, even if a landlord doesn't like it. It's in the county law. But besides landlord opposition, there are other barriers to forming a tenants association. One of them being just apathy in the community. Some people think like, why should I join? How will this benefit me? Like, is this just a wine and cheese night that I have to pay dues to? Like, how is this actually helping me? But as David mentioned, there's definitely solidarity in numbers, and knowing that you're having an issue with you have bed bugs or you have roaches, and knowing that like your neighbor does too, and that if you call down a leasing office and they tell you, wow, you're the only person who's ever complained about this, you know that that's not true, and that other people are experiencing the same issue. And it gives the community a good reason to come together to address some similar problems. And some communities, it's just easier for some to organize than others. Some of our most successful tenant associations we see at senior buildings, just because seniors tend to have more time on their hands to be active in their association, versus maybe like a building with a lot of working class families just doesn't have the same amount of time to meet regularly. But even if you can only attend once every 3 months, there's still a benefit to being part of that association, so that when an issue does come up, you have the resources. Because a lot of times, if there's a problem, like one of our buildings that we're working with, a lot of tenants talked about a water bill issue. Everyone was kind of confused on how their water bill was being calculated, and they don't know who to call, besides just calling the leasing office. So having able to connect you to the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs or code enforcement, or to us. So it's just having another, like, just like a common channel to kind of provide feedback about what's going on in the building and express concerns about different things.
Let me throw in a couple other things, Emily, to what you're saying. When we talked about, a busy building, where you might think there's apathy, there's a lot of reasons for that. As Emily pointed out, we're in building of working class folks. People are busy, they just don't have time. Senior buildings do better because they have more time. But also, I would point out, because I know Vicki is thinking about this, that senior citizens also tend to know the value of a tenants association more than other folks, because they've been around the block a few times, and they know what can happen when you don't act collectively. So one has to think about, when you think about retaliation, you might be afraid if you form a tenants association, you might be retaliated against. Well, you're actually more protected if you do. But the flip side is you're likely to be, if you're any person who's complaining or about any issue, unless you want to live with that issue, you're even more likely to be retaliated against if you act alone to address that issue. So working together actually is stronger. And the other thing about, tenants associations and apathy, I don't know a single tenants association that, well, a couple of them did very well, but most of them, you don't get everybody. You'll only get a small fraction of the building. And that's perfectly normal. People, unfortunately, everybody knows the story of the hen who asked everybody in the barnyard to help bake the bread, and nobody wanted to help. And when she finally gets it baked, she asks, does anybody want to help me eat it? And everybody shows up. Well, tenants associations and being active in your community often works that way too. And some people will be active for a little while and then fall out for a little while and come back when they need the tenants association. And that's the rock and roll of any tenants association. And it is a challenge, which is why we often suggest having different agenda items aside from just complaining.
Right.
So, people can enjoy themselves. What else, Emily?
There's the logistical issues. Like, some people don't know how to even get, you might be interested and you don't know, are there any other neighbors who are also interested in forming, and maybe you don't have people's contact information. Maybe you're new to the building and you don't know, like you're not connected at all with other people. And what we've done before is we can help to organize the first meeting, where we can help to distribute flyers around the building, just to get people's attention and kind of get some interest buzzing around the building. And then there's the next issue is like, where are we going to meet? Are we going to have a space? And for those maybe joined late, Matt went over some of the Montgomery County law earlier, and tenants have a right to use the community room in their building at no charge for once a month. If you want to meet more than once a month, they can charge you, but probably don't need to meet more than once a month anyways, unless there's like a big issue. But if you're just having like your standard once a month meeting or once every other month meeting, that is free of charge. And sometimes there's pushback with that. Sometimes the property manager will say, no, you're not allowed to use the room, which we've also dealt with. But just know it, being informed of your right and knowing that you as a tenant do have the right to use the room. You can always reach out to us, and I'll drop our email in the chat. If you try to go to your property manager and say, hey, can we reserve this room, 2 weeks from now on Thursday at 5:00, and it's not booked, but they just say no, or you're going to need to pay, you can always reach out to us, and we can speak to them and show them the part of the law that says they have to give you the room.
Yes, we recently have done that to one property manager who then took the law and threw it in the trash can. And then we helped the Tenants Association escalate that through the county. And we will escalate it as far as it needs to go to make sure that the law is enforced. But many times it's just a matter of informing property management about your rights. And we can help with that. I want to talk a little bit about consensus and division in apartment buildings, Emily.
Yeah, I mean, we just last week we were having a first tenants association meeting that was open to everyone in the building, and sometimes there's different personalities in there. There's some people who they want to talk about the issue they're experiencing, and it might not be the issue that other people are experiencing. And the point of the Tenants Association is to include everyone. It's not just a channel for one person to vent all their problems. It's about what's affecting the community. And for that, it's just like in general, dealing with people. You all live in the same building, you're all neighbors. That's everyone's home. So it is in your best interest to get along, or at least be civil amongst each other. Something like a A or B level tenants association, if they have officers, you have your president, your vice president, you can always hold elections like maybe every 6 months. So that way, if no one is happy with the leadership, there's no dictator. You are also a tenant, and you guys have the ability to kind of make your own rules and decide that this leadership isn't working out. Let's hold elections. Let's give them a chance, and let's hold elections in 6 months and pick someone new to be the president or the vice president or what have you. And just knowing that it's not so important as to whose name is president, but as long as they're representing everyone's interests and communicating that to management.
And I guess the other reason why I wanted to point out the division is that division in apartment communities, just like in neighborhoods, just like in towns, just like in our country, is perfectly normal. Well, as long as it's not as extreme as we've seen lately. But it is. If you're thinking that you're going to get everybody in the building facing the same direction and agreeing on every issue, you're never going to be happy. But understanding that disagreement and different opinions is a common characteristic of any coalition, any tenants association, any political party, anybody who's trying to get something done collectively, it's normal, but it is a challenge. And so what Emily's pointing out is, you need to figure out ways to be civil, to have rules that respect everybody's opinion, but also have a process, usually a democratic process, that determines what the priorities are and what the tenants association is going to do, including its agenda, whether it's going to write a letter to the property manager, whether it's going to have a holiday party or not, or whatever. But there needs to be a process, usually a democratic process, and understand that not everybody's going to win all the time. Some people will just have to go along with the majority, as long as they've had their opportunity to have their say, that's okay. Perfectly normal. I don't know too many tenants associations that don't have disagreements and personalities and all of those challenges. So I thought we'd go now and sorry, Emily, go ahead.
Just one more thing.
Yeah, sure.
And for anyone who's watching, who's like thinking about forming, you can always invite us to your first meeting and we can kind of give an overview and maybe mediate for the first one till you're more well established, and then you can take it from there. But we're always happy to come kind of get people set up. So just putting that out there.
Good. So we also wanted to talk about best practices. So let's say you're getting going. So let's talk about some of the aspects of a successful tenants association. Tim Huang, why don't you get us going on that?
Yeah. Can everyone hear me? Yeah.
Loud and clear.
Okay. Great. So so some best practices for signing up a tenants association. I think the number one thing is pretty much keep it simple. It's not that complicated why you want a tenant association. You want to have the place where everyone is living together, be clean, safe, and it also helps promote community in the building. But that's pretty much the basics of it. And if you want to kind of type in the chat what are some rules you think would help achieve that purpose? We can go over some rules. You need to have rules for meetings. Otherwise, it just gets out of hand and goes on tangents and stuff. So if you're in the chat, just go ahead and propose a couple of things. You definitely want to avoid. It's not a political meeting. You can have different political ideas, but you're all living in the same building. And so you all need to get along, and you all are going through the same things. There's also you don't want to make it only one type of religious or ethnic identity. Everyone is living together. We had in our last meeting with Emily and Malek and Matt, there were Spanish speakers there, and they I was helping translate for them, but they might have a little bit harder time kind of following the meeting, but they're still there, and very much a part of that community as everyone else is. So you definitely want to try and include everyone, but doesn't mean, like Matt said, that everyone will come to it. Let's see if there's any rules in the chat.
Tim, let me just underscore something you just said about keeping as much consensus as possible in a tenants association. And one of the ways in which you do that is to eliminate factional kinds of things. That includes, unless, we have one tenants association that is in a building that is of a particular religious denomination. So it makes sense that building that the tenants association follows their sort of building's purpose. It's a church, it's owned by a church, and so they have a religious orientation. However, they also acknowledge in those meetings that there may be people living there of a different religion. Generally speaking, for buildings that do not have a particular religious orientation, which is most of us, it's not a good idea to include religious activities or religion in your tenants association. Our founding fathers of our country kept that separate from the government and our Constitution for a reason, because there's so many of us with different faiths that you don't want to have that kind of conflict. And the same thing goes with political orientation. Some buildings might be more conservative or liberal than others or whatever, really shouldn't be brought into the tenants association, because you're just going to create division that's unnecessary, because your primary purpose, Tim, if you just read off what I think we got in there somewhere about the common purpose of a tenants association, I think it's in the somewhere in there.
in the agenda.
in the agenda, right? Just stick to the simple purpose. What is that?
Oh, so the purpose of the tenant association should be to promote through group action a clean, well-maintained, safe building, and to promote community within the building and neighborhood, and advance the rights and security of tenants generally.
That's it. If your tenants association is about promoting something else, you're bound to create division. Everybody's interested in the building, the quality of life, the affordability, the relationship to the property manager, the pool hours, if you have a pool, whatever it is, but it has to do with living in the apartment community and not about, as a tenants association, about any number of other things like religion or politics or some ethnic particular interest about whatever public policy issue that is not related to the tenants association. Now, that's a best practice. You all can decide whatever you want to do, but just a little bit of warning based on our experience. And I used to have brown hair, and it's all white now, based on my experience dealing with some of these issues. Tim, what else?
Yeah. So yeah, you want to meet regularly, but not too often. Like people are busy. But it really helps keep the momentum going to have like a set date, like say the first of the month, or like the first Wednesday of the month, once a month, and that way it kind of sticks in people's brains. And like if there are new people, you can, and they ask like, oh, when's the meeting? You don't have to think about what date is it after. You can just be like, oh, it's always the first or last Friday, or whatever day of the month. So that's really important. Yeah, and like regarding rules, like you definitely want to have rules to keep things from getting out of hand. Like things like like we don't talk about tenant to tenant issues. Like the purpose of the meeting is to have the management or people come together to decide what to do as a group, not to kind of call out people. So that is a potential example of a rule. Yeah, and other rules that would help facilitate the meeting. Like if you want to have rules to determine like who's going to lead the meeting, or like you need to have an agenda. So things like that you definitely want to have, like what they call bylaws. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Did I miss anything, Matt?
Yeah, one more thing. I didn't put it on the list, but it's something to think about. It's good to start on time and end on time. Something we often say. We certainly try to do so here. There isn't a meeting on earth that I know of where you're going to solve every problem in the meeting. That you can always have another meeting. I also know that good meetings have a certain energy curve. Starts off and then it gets high and then it gets low. And if you keep going, things can get either boring or rancorous or frustrating or confusing. And so it's good to sort of end, have a meeting that's a reasonable length of time, hour and a half or whatever, maybe with always followed by wine and cheese or something social or whatever, but that ends when you say it's going to end so people can plan. If they think they're going to come to a meeting that never ends, and it's just a constant harangue, then people are going to be turned off and they're just not going to come to these meetings. So you have to be careful that it's a reasonable period of time, hour and a half, on a regular basis, whether that's once a month, once every 3 months, twice a year, whatever you decide. Maybe special meetings for holidays, and the offices can meet more often if they choose to do so. But having that kind of best practice is usually a good idea for keeping people engaged. Anything else on that front from folks listening in?
Just to double down on that point, because you were talking generally about meetings, but and good meetings, but I mean when you're talking about where you live, there's always more to say, is what I've noticed. So you really do need to kind of that endpoint really is a favor to the people involved in the future meetings. That's for real.
Right. So let's.
And then I just want to reiterate, solidarity is very important. I know everyone has stressed that or have mentioned that, but you need that kind of support. in your community. So, you know, you need to get together. One person, like Emily said, going to the property manager or the rental office will not do anything. But when you have other tenants in the building having the same problem, it can't be denied. So I just want to say solidarity, solidarity, solidarity.
Couldn't agree with you more. I'm gonna pull up something here. Just that doing the same shtick I did before where I can't find what I'm looking for. Hang on. There we go. Okay. I'm gonna pull up the Renters Alliance flyer on forming tenants associations, and we'll all take a look at it just to see if there's anything that we missed. And then we will proudly introduce one of our guests. Everybody see that? All right, how to form a tenants association. Pat and David, would you sort of walk us through some of this? Pat, you're on mute.
You're on mute if you want to start.
Okay, one is talk to your neighbors. Ask your neighbors if they have ideas for improving their homes and find out if they are interested in meeting with other tenants to discuss how you can help each other. If your neighbors are interested by the idea, then ask when it's a good time for them to attend an initial meeting is. 2, plan an initial meeting. Schedule a meeting at a time when other interested tenants are available at someone's apartment or in any open area of the building or at a nearby public location. Make sure to write, call, or give notice to all tenants by letting them know the date, time, and location of the meeting. Be sure to include the purpose of the meeting and encourage them to bring their own ideas on how you can help each other. Before the first meeting, prepare your own ideas, paper and pens for taking notes, and collaborate to share light refreshments if feasible. Remember, when organizing a meeting, that collaborating with fellow tenants is protected by law and that no tenant should fear retaliation. I want to say that again.
Yes. Say it again.
Fellow tenants is protected by law and that no tenant should fear retaliation.
David, pick it up.
Well, just a quick note on that we do understand why people do fear that, and this is all tied into why, and also to just a reminder to people to be flexible about that first meeting, about where and when, listen to others' input, and a reminder of what Emily said earlier, that we are here to help with this. We recommend trying to invite everybody, and we're glad to help with getting a flyer to every door so that everyone has a chance to attend that initial meeting. And one more time, a lot of places have a lot of initial meetings, right? These things come in waves, and please don't let that discourage you. But okay, yeah, and on the vein of inviting everybody, get to know each other. At the initial meeting, make sure all attendants briefly introduce themselves, give a short explanation of why they're interested in associating with other residents. After introductions, discuss what you have in common, how a tenant association would benefit your community. It may be helpful to review the different ways issues are dealt with by tenants and property management, and any other initiatives tenants have pursued or are working on. Identify common problems and pursuits, and focus on how you can increase the impact of your individual efforts by working together. That's solidarity and collective power, absolutely.
Pat, wind us up.
Finally, make a proposition to form a tenants association. Okay, How
Oh, I'm
to,
sorry, I did that to you.
that's okay. Have meeting participants deliberate and vote on the proposal. Share your thoughts on why it is important to work together. And remind meeting participants that you are all protected by the law to meet, strategize, and organize for the purpose of tenant affairs. If there is agreement on forming an association, ensure that following meetings are scheduled for discussing organization structure, purpose, goals, and projects. That's all there is to it. Simple.
Very good. I just wanted to sort of go through that. We've got this flyer, that we hand out to folks who are organizing tenants associations. So if you'd like a copy, we're happy to send that to you. If I could figure out a way to put it in the chat, I would. Maybe I can. If that works, I will do it. And everyone, see if that works. See if you can get it there. If not, it's a PDF. If that doesn't work, we will email it to everybody. We certainly will put it up in our newsletter from time to time. Now we have with us one of our sage, wise, and beautiful tenant activists who's been a leader in some of the more challenging environments in Montgomery County and a leader of renters. It's my pleasure and my honor to introduce Victoria Price. Vicki, tell us a little bit about your experience as the head of your tenants association, forming tenants associations, and some of the challenges and the benefits that you've seen from being a tenant organizer.
Well, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Well, first, I'd like to say that when I moved into Charterhouse in 2005, there was already a residence council. It was already formed and had been for several years. It had an executive board. It had formal elections. It had its bylaws, already had those in place. So for those of us who ran after the former officers decided to, in quote unquote, retire, we basically had a map that would enable us to continue the duties. But one thing I did learn is that we had a residence council, and after a number of years, we formed a formal residence association, and by that, we filed LLC papers with the state. We paid a fee. So it was a very formal situation. But even before that, it was still formal. When you talk about alpha level, we had an executive board, we had an advisory board, and we had a pro bono attorney. And this is someone Matt Losick actually knows, Shelley Skolnick. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But one thing I've learned is that the kind of residence council or association, whatever you want to call it, very much depends on the relationship between the residents and management. Because at Charterhouse, I was on the board for 16 years. And most of our officers were on that board for a good 13 to 14. I was the longest serving. We still have a board president there who doesn't have much of a board now because some of us moved, some are deceased, some went into assisted living, but there's still some tenant advocacy that's occurring at Charterhouse. We, as I said, had an advisory board, kind of off and on. And they were basically, did a lot of research for us. So for example, when we had issues with mold, ongoing issues because the convectors were never cleaned. And even though we had official duties for the president, first vice president, second vice president, I was actually corresponding secretary, and we had a secretary who also took minutes, and basically was supposed to set up the agenda. But when she moved out, I ended up with 2 jobs just to keep the business flowing. We have approximately 20 years worth of minutes filed at Charterhouse. For anyone who wants to see the history of Charterhouse, what we've experienced. And also, one way we kept our residents not just interested through advocacy, we also brought in guest speakers. And our first guest speaker was a staff member from Gloria Lala's office to speak on programs for seniors. Then we became very, very political, which was not an issue. It was not an issue for us. Our State Senator Will Smith was one of our guest speakers. Well, actually, he was there very frequently. Tom Hucker, our former council member, was there frequently. And I made a joke that he lived at Charterhouse. He didn't pay rent, but he lived there. Our most recent guest speaker was U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen, and he saw us the day before the county shut down because of COVID. But we brought in many, many guest speakers. Former County Executive Ike Leggett was one. We just started bringing in people who would attract our residents. So they would have issues that were political, but some of them would also pertain to the Charterhouse. And we also, because of the relationship with management, which really wasn't, frankly, very good, and I won't go into detail, but we came to know just about everybody in the office of landlord-tenant. And I think that Matt Losick will agree with me. Are you listening? Hello? No? Okay.
Of course I'm listening.
Yes, but also Matt Losick was a frequent visitor to Charterhouse, especially whenever it flooded, which was quite frequent. And as I said, this was when we talk about alpha level, we basically personally were active in a way went above and beyond the duties that were delineated in the bylaws. So for instance, if management was overstepping in certain ways, I worked with our pro bono attorney, which you probably will not see in a regular residence council or association, but I ended up doing some pre-legal work for him if he had to go to court. And that was a way of servicing our pro bono, his pro bono status, so that he wasn't really working in a sense for nothing. And for instance, the Cassidys, our board president and first vice president, let's just say that they were very religious people, not in the sense of proselytizing, but in the sense of assisting our residents. So if someone was about to be evicted, then they would find a way for somebody to put belongings in storage. Now, that is not in the bylaws, so to speak, but that was something that kept the Charterhouse Residence Council, and the Residence Council wasn't the executive board. Residence Council, according to the bylaws, was every resident at the Charterhouse. So we had the council, which was everybody. We had the executive board, and we had an advisory board. The executive board was voted into office every November. The second Wednesday in November, it was delineated in the bylaws. And the residents who paid dues, and the dues were only $6 a year. But the reason we had dues was so that I could get some money for ink and paper, because I basically was the one who printed up the agenda, printed up the minutes, distributed the documents, and I was the keeper of all the records in the documents.
And I think that goes to something, Vicki, that we
depends on just
mention as best
yes.
practices, which is, being able to, have a little bit of annual dues to pay for some of those expenses, or for wine and cheese, or some
Sure.
refreshments.
And Yes, and that depends on how the residents, if that's something they want or what they're willing to do to have that. So, I mean, it's basically a consensus. And the first time we had Matt Losick, there were 214 apartments, still are at Charter House, but we had 75 people there, and everyone unanimously voted to join the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. So now I've moved to Kensington. I'm at Silver Creek. We are in the process of forming a residents council. I've asked Matt to come to Silver Creek and talk about forming a residents council. That's not something I think I really should do. I want the big gun to do that job. But we had a lot of problems there, and it's still continuing. But
So Vicki,
any
can
rate-
you talk a little bit about, you know, if it weren't for the tenants association in that building, I don't think you would have been able to solve a lot of the problems that you had.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. Well, we had a lot of infrastructure problems. We had some problems with certain management personnel who basically were, I would say, violating landlord-tenant code. But then some of it wasn't even landlord-tenant code, but some of it basically involved what I would call not doing something that was quite, I would say quite legal. I'll give you an example. Well, yeah, well, okay, I'll give you an example. Our residents were allowed to have pets. At the time I was there, they could have pets. And management, this was some years ago, issued a memo that said visitors cannot bring their pets to visit someone who has pets. And so our pro bono attorney said, well, they can't do that. If people are allowed to have pets, then there's no reason somebody can't have a visitor, you know, to bring pets. Because what management wanted to do was charge a fee for somebody who wanted to bring in to bring a pet to visit. Well, you can't do that if somebody who lives in the building is allowed to have a pet. We had another issue where, and I've testified to this before in regard to just cause eviction, and one of our neighbors had continual overflow in her kitchen sink. This was the 4th floor at Charter House. I call it the haunted floor. But what happened was the workmen who were hired, subcontractors, to do some, what's the word I want? Renewal plumbing. I'll just put it that way. This was a year after I moved in and didn't even know that construction was going to take place. We were never told. But what they did was they hooked up the kitchen sinks of several apartments to the washing machines in the laundry room, so that every time somebody dumped their water or the water drained out of the washing machine, it would back up.
Uh-oh, Vicki, you're frozen. I think we lost you.
She just couldn't stay.
Oh, there you go.
And she was, there had been complaints about that apartment even before she moved in. So she would spend a lot of time in the lobby. Sometimes she would fall asleep. So the regional manager issued a memorandum to us and said that if a resident was caught sleeping in the lobby, then the security would be told to call the police.
I remember I dealt with that one.
Remember that?
They actually
Yes.
published that. It was so
Yes.
outrageous in a senior building to actually tell seniors, if you fall asleep in the community chairs in the lobby, that somehow you're going to be evicted. It was outrageous.
Well,
Vicki,
you're
let
going
me,
to call the police and be arrested is what it boils down to.
absurd.
But of course,
we just recently dealt with a similar thing at Charter House with ongoing saga, where they told people that they couldn't congregate in the lobby for more than 15 minutes. outrageous. They couldn't enforce that whatsoever. But Vicky, let me interrupt you because we do have another
Sure.
tenant leader, and thank you for that. You've been at it for
Yes,
a long time.
and thank you
We
very
look
much.
forward to organizing your new building. Tell them to watch out because here we come.
Oh, God.
Pat, Malek, introduce your colleague from Spring Park.
Right. So it is, I'm very honored actually to introduce Miss Pat, is what we're going to call her. She's from Spring Park. We met Miss Pat almost like a year ago. They ran into just continual problems with management. That management, by the way, has changed repeatedly, like every 3 to 4 or 6 months. And
Oh, my goodness.
huh? Oh, and
Oh, I'm
Pat,
sorry. I'm not muted. Let me do this.
so Miss Pat started this tenant association by getting a group of people together at Panera. And then she brought us in, and from there it's expanded into a tenant association meetings. It's been very successful. She has fought, she created a listserv. She has engaged in doing flyer distribution. She's exhausted her energy into building up this tenant association, which has had pretty much a tremendous effect on an impact on the residents. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Pat. I don't know where you are. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Hi,
We can
can
hear
you
you.
hear me? Good
Yes.
evening. Oh, hi, and thank you. I'm really honored to say a couple of words about our struggle here at Spring Park. I know that Maddie and David have been extremely helpful in getting us started. And just aside for a minute, I want to say hello to Vicky. And Vicky, I met you over the phone. I'm Pam Oxley's sister, if that rings a bell to you. And we met briefly over the phone, you and I, Vicky. So good to hear you this evening. But getting back to Spring Park, yes, it's been a year since Malek and David have been helping us, and they have been stalwart with attending our meetings and help us navigate some tricky and horrifying situations here at Spring Park. And we fall under the category of, I saw the agenda, you had tenants association, tenants, we fall under the D part, which is like concerned tenants getting together. So right now we're known as a tenant committee. And we have two very good tenants who've joined us. And I think we're going to move far with them, with Edwina and Miss J. So all I have to say, it's been a struggle. We met Malek at Panera, and the rest is history. So we're in the process of trying to continue that. We have a couple of exciting events going on this month. We've also done canvassing door to door with another entity called Everyday Canvassing. They've come to our rescue on quite a few things. So has Impact Silver Spring. So we're still continuing to meet, and the fight continues, the struggle continues. And one of the reasons why we got involved with Renters Alliance is because we've known Matt from way back, and Matt intervened with us with this defective lease issue. Every year when we go to renew our lease, my daughter and I, we have to deal with the issue of defective lease renewal. And Matt intervened very strongly and was able to deal with that. It wasn't Bridge at the time, but the defective lease saga continues. So we're looking forward to having another meeting this month, and I know we're going to see Malek and David there. And I'm just very hopeful for our group at Spring Park, because we got our work cut out for us.
Thank
That's
you.
all I have to say.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Pat. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm finished for the evening, and I thank you so much for all the work that you've done from Since Forever, Matt, on organizing Renters Alliance.
Well,
We don't
here's
know what we would do
the
without Renters
reality for us, Pat, is that we can't do it without people like you,
Right.
without people like Vicky, without all of your neighbors who stand up and do this. So, you know, we're helping you all to help yourselves as former Peace Corps volunteer, helping people help themselves. And that's the way it works. But active residents who stand up, who insist on getting the rights and services that they're entitled to for the rent that you pay, is perfectly normal. And you should be doing it. And we're so glad to see it. And I'm glad, Pat, also that you pointed out that you're a different kind of tenants association. You're nascent, you're just getting started. And that's perfectly appropriate. And of course, we hope that you get even more organized and more powerful as time goes on. But, you know, the experience of some people getting through some of these issues makes you more knowledgeable and more powerful.
Thank you.
All right, folks, do we have any questions or concerns in the chat regarding tenants associations? And if we will address those, and then if there are any issues that renters are seeing right now out there that we can address, we'll spend a few minutes on that, and then we'll wrap it up.
On the general issues front, I think you did have some rent increase questions early on, but more in this vein still with the tenants association. I thought I remembered seeing, I don't know where it was, but someone asking about like an initial meeting where it was basically all leaders. It felt like they had just a group of everyone was going to lead. And I think maybe they were looking for some guidance on whether how to diffuse or move forward from that, or how to kind of channel that energy maybe.
You mean if you have 5 presidents arrive at the meeting?
That's what it sounded like. Was
Well, I mean, it's a good problem to have, but everybody has to be a good president, and a good president says, listen, I'll do it if you all would like me to. If somebody else would prefer, that's fine. And you have to work it out democratically. Not everybody can be president at once, but if you all want to be leaders, you can all take different roles in the tenants association. It's not necessarily a formal structure all the time. Sometimes the president may not be able to lead the meeting and somebody else will lead the meeting. So you could also have a committee, just an executive committee with no titles, and decided of a road, like, you know, I hate to use this example, but Lord of the Flies, whoever's holding the conch, you know, could be the one who speaks. Right?
Let's hope that's the only.
But you know, there are ways to rotate around so that everybody has a say, and also to remember that the committee that's organizing also will have to turn over the conch, so to speak, to the audience, to the residents.
But
People may not be able to organize the meeting, but they may come to the meeting and have a lot to say that could be valuable. So everybody, a way to think about how to give everybody an opportunity while the leadership moderates and sticks to a basic structure of starting on time, finishing on time, and addressing some issues. And frankly, in some cases, like with me right now, saying, hey, you know, that's enough. Let's let somebody else talk.
There you go. No, that's helpful reminder there. There's term limits built into a lot of this, and if you're going to be there for a while, it'll come around and things. So that's helpful. And yeah, I would. And I'll just throw in that I again, for me, a lot of it comes back to being flexible on the form that it takes, you know, an organic form. It takes time and things. You know, I live somewhere where there's almost 800 units, and you know, the first couple meetings were between 5 and 10 people, and that's it is normal, but it will fluctuate and things. And I just want to make sure people don't get disheartened by that sort of thing. That was all I had on that one, Matt, though. I think that's.
Anything else out there, folks, that got noticed that needs to be addressed? Then let me throw in a couple of points before we wrap up. First of all, a reminder, the rent stabilization bill that was signed into law on July. Sorry?
I'm sorry. On the TA, one more thing I completely forgot. I just wanted to throw a plug that we should not get into these weeds tonight, but that if your property goes up for sale, having a tenants association can be a big factor in that situation, and that especially if there's a certain amount involved and it becomes formalized, that you could be a player in that situation. The county has an involvement too. And while we don't have time to maybe get into that now, I do want to throw out that that's an important thing. As often as we see some of these properties go up for sale, people don't really know what to do as that's coming. When that happens, there is a piece of that we can discuss further if need be. There you go.
It is something that doesn't occur in most properties, so just keep that in mind. But in the situation, as David points out, where the property goes up for sale, the tenants are to be offered the right of first refusal to purchase the property, and there is a process to have standing as a tenants association. And in a future discussion, we can have that. But if anybody is having that situation now, please reach out to us and we can advise you. I know that the county Department of Housing and Community Affairs is very interested in strengthening that law, but it is not necessary for the kinds of tenants associations that we're talking about this evening. They could be at the level that Pat was discussing as a committee of active residents, all the way up to the kind of more formal and structured tenants association that Ms. Price was talking about, that she led for many years. So there's a whole range of possibilities here. So back to the other point I want to make about where we are with the rent stabilization bill. Signed into law on July 24th. It is still not effective yet. No law in Montgomery County that is signed into law takes effect for at least 90 days. So you got 90 days. That's the first thing. The second thing is that there are several provisions in this law that require the Department of Housing to develop regulations. We had a town hall meeting a couple of weeks ago to go over those regulations that are in development, and we urge all of you to take a look at it. Look at our YouTube link, look at our newsletter, and look at those areas of regulation and see if you have any suggestions or concerns to raise with the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, and send them to us at info@rentersalliance.org so that we can compile that and send that to DHCA, Department of Housing and Community Affairs, to make sure that they know what those concerns are. You can be sure that the landlords are doing their due diligence to get their input on those regulations. So we don't want any weakening of this legislation. It is legislation that we think we're very pleased with. We think it's a good step forward, but it is hardly as strong as we would have liked. So we want to make sure that it is not weakened in any way. That's what's coming down the pike. And if you have any other questions or concerns, please contact us. Again, at info@rentersalliance.org. We can guide you we can address your issues, give you our expert advice, or guide you to enforcement processes or other resources that we are aware of that may be available to you. I will also want to point out that we are part of the outreach program for the Maryland Legal Services Corporation Access to Counsel program. That was a legislation and program support that we worked very hard to see passed by the state legislature that created a fund for people who are 50% area median income, that is lower income tenants, to get a lawyer if you're facing eviction. Again, it's a program that is funded through the Maryland Legal Services Corporation called the Access to Counsel program. And it provides for lawyers free of charge to tenants facing eviction if you're low-income tenants. And they define low income, generally speaking, as 50% of area median income. So I think if you're single, area median income in Montgomery County is 125,000, something like that. But if you're not sure, just reach out to us and we will advise you and put you in the right direction. But we see, unfortunately, that many tenants who go to court do not have a lawyer, and you can be sure that the landlord does. So we want to make sure that that there's a level playing field so that tenants know how to navigate the court system and know how to deal with their situation with expert advice. Anything else from anybody, staff, or Vicki, do you want to give a last word? You're on mute. Can't do it unless you're off mute. Hang on. It's gonna be good, I know. Still on mute.
Gotta smash that unmute button.
There you go.
Okay, my fault for only having 2 ports on this thing. Okay, no, every rental property should have a residence council, residence association, committee, whatever they want to call it. But every single property should have that. And that's not, to me, that's not something that it's an if or an or, it is a should and a must.
Well, thank you for that. We couldn't agree with you more. Don't wait to find out when you're in trouble with an abusive property manager or neglectful landlord that you needed a tenants association that you don't have. So by all means, get one together. So with that, thank you to everybody. Thank you to Pat Moran. Thank you to Victoria Price, our esteemed guests, to my staff, David Mullins, Emily Towie, Tim Huang, Pat Beckham, and Malek Demir. And thank you to all of you for attending. It is on YouTube if you want to watch it again or pick up some more information or share it with somebody else. And of course, if you've signed up for this town hall, you will be in our database and receive a newsletter down the road. And if you need any questions answered or concerns addressed, contact us at info@rentersalliance.org. And with that, thank you and good night.